It was just another day for Donald Trump, or so everyone thought. You know how some days feel normal, like nothing special is happening? Well, that's how this day started for him. Donald Trump had done a lot of things in his life. He built big buildings, made lots of money, shook hands with important people, and always seemed to be in the news. Sometimes people loved him, and sometimes they didn't. But no matter what, he was always busy doing something big or exciting. But today felt different. It wasn't like any other day. Today, Trump wasn't meeting a rich businessman or a famous politician. He wasn't talking about deals or campaigns. Instead, he was sitting across from someone very unusual. Someone who didn't seem like the kind of person Trump would usually spend time with. Across the table sat General Samuel Sam Whitaker. Let me tell you about Sam. He was 92 years old, which means he had lived a very long life. And guess what? He was still working. Not many people at that age are still active in their jobs, but Sam was. He was the oldest active military officer in U.S. history. That means he had been in the military longer than anyone else alive. Now, imagine this: Sam walked into the room wearing his uniform. It fit him perfectly, like it was made just for him. His uniform was covered with shiny medals. These medals weren't just decorations, they were awards for all the brave things he had done. Each medal told a story. Some were for battles he fought in. Others were for helping people during hard times. Every single one showed how much he had given to his country. But there was something else about Sam. Something you couldn't see right away. It wasn't his medals or his uniform. It was harder to explain. Maybe it was the way he carried himself. He stood tall, even though he was old. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes. They were sharp and bright, like he could see right through you. Whatever it was, it made Trump stop and think. Even someone as confident as Trump felt a little unsure when he looked at Sam. The place where they met was simple. They weren't in a fancy office or a crowded hall. They were in a quiet corner of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. If you don't know what Mar-a-Lago is, it's a big house that Trump owns in Florida. It's beautiful, with gardens and pools and rooms full of expensive furniture. But for this meeting, they chose a small, quiet spot. There were no cameras flashing. No reporters asking questions. No crowds watching. Just two men sitting across from each other. Now, here's the big question: why did Trump invite Sam? Think about it. Trump is used to being around powerful people, CEOs, presidents, celebrities. So why would he want to meet an old military officer? And why now? Was there something special about this moment? And here's another question: what could Sam teach Trump? Trump is known for thinking he knows everything. He likes to make decisions quickly and doesn't always listen to others. But Sam was different. He was older, wiser, and had seen more of the world than most people ever will. Could Sam share something with Trump that he hadn't heard before? Stay with me, I urge you, because this conversation will change how you see both of them. This isn't just a story about two men talking. It's about what happens when two very different worlds come together. One man is loud, bold, and always in the spotlight. The other is quiet, steady, and works behind the scenes. Together, they might learn something new, not just about each other, but about themselves. Let's go back to the beginning of the day. Before the meeting happened, Trump probably woke up like he usually does. He might have had breakfast, read the news, or talked to his team about what he needed to do that day. But somewhere along the way, he decided to meet with Sam. We don't know exactly why yet, but we can guess. Maybe Trump wanted to hear stories from someone who had lived such a long and interesting life. Or maybe he wanted advice on leadership. After all, leading a country is a lot like leading an army, right? On the other side, Sam must have prepared too. Getting ready to meet someone like Trump isn't easy. Trump is known for saying whatever comes to his mind, whether it's polite or not. He's also used to being the center of attention. So, Sam had to think carefully about what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. He couldn't let Trump's personality overwhelm him. At the same time, he had to respect Trump's position as a former president. When they finally sat down together, the room was silent except for the sound of their voices. Trump probably started by saying hello and shaking Sam's hand. Then, maybe he asked a few questions to break the ice. "So, General, how are you still so active at your age?" he might have said. Or, "What's the secret to staying strong after all these years?" Sam listened patiently. He didn't rush to answer. When he did speak, his words were calm and clear. He didn't try to impress Trump with big speeches or complicated ideas. Instead, he shared bits of his life one piece at a time. Each word was like a puzzle piece, slowly forming a picture of who he was and what he believed in. As the minutes passed, Trump began to realize that this wasn't going to be a typical meeting. Usually, when Trump talks to people, he does most of the talking. But with Sam, it was different. Sam had a way of making Trump listen. He didn't argue or interrupt. He simply spoke from his heart, sharing lessons he had learned over decades of service. Now, let's zoom out for a second. Imagine you're watching the scene unfold. Picture the room, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and the faint smell of coffee in the air. Outside, palm trees sway gently in the breeze. Inside, two men from completely different backgrounds were connecting in a way neither of them expected. Trump grew up in a wealthy family and became a billionaire by building hotels and casinos. He's used to luxury and power. Sam, on the other hand, grew up in a simpler time. He joined the military because he wanted to serve his country. He didn't care about money or fame. All he cared about was doing his job well and protecting the people he loved. These differences made their meeting even more fascinating. How could two people with such different lives find common ground? Would they understand each other? Or would their differences create tension? To keep things interesting, let's add a little suspense. Remember how I said Trump likes to be in charge? Well, that didn't work so well with Sam. At one point, Trump tried to take control of the conversation. He started talking about his own achievements, hoping to impress Sam. But Sam didn't react the way Trump expected. Instead of nodding or agreeing, Sam smiled slightly and said, "Mr. Trump, success isn't measured by how much you accomplish. It's measured by how much you give back." That sentence stopped Trump in his tracks. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Most people either praised him or criticized him. But Sam was different. He wasn't trying to flatter Trump or attack him. He was just telling the truth, plain and simple. This exchange set the tone for the rest of their meeting. From that point on, Trump paid closer attention to what Sam was saying. He realized that Sam wasn't just an old man with medals. He was a teacher, a storyteller, and a leader all rolled into one. As the conversation continued, Trump found himself drawn into Sam's world. It wasn't just the stories that intrigued him, it was the way Sam told them. He didn't brag or boast. Instead, he spoke with humility, as if every word carried weight. Each sentence painted a vivid picture of battles fought, friendships forged, and lessons learned. Sam began by talking about his early days in the military. "When I first joined," he said, "I was just a young man looking for purpose. I didn't know much about war or leadership. All I knew was that I wanted to protect my country." His voice was steady, but you could hear the emotion behind it. Trump leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "What was it like back then?" he asked. "Was it harder than today?" Sam chuckled softly. "Different, yes. Harder? Maybe. We didn't have the technology you have now. No drones, no satellites. Everything depended on people, on their courage and their ability to work together. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then he added, but some things never change. War is still war. It takes lives, breaks families, and leaves scars. The real challenge isn't winning battles, it's finding peace afterward. Trump nodded slowly, absorbing what Sam was saying. This wasn't the kind of talk he was used to hearing. Most people around him focused on power, money, and success. But Sam was talking about something deeper, something that mattered more. To help Trump understand better, Sam shared a story from his past. There was a time, he began, when I led a group of soldiers into a dangerous mission. We were outnumbered and outgunned. Many thought we wouldn't make it back alive. Trump interrupted, unable to resist asking, "Did you win?" Sam smiled faintly. Winning isn't always about surviving. Sometimes, it's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard. He went on to explain how his team had managed to save civilians trapped in a conflict zone. They risked their lives not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. That day, Sam said, I learned that true leadership means putting others before yourself. It's not about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about caring for the people who depend on you. Trump listened quietly, his usual bravado replaced by genuine interest. He had never thought about leadership in this way. For him, success had always been about results, about achieving goals and proving others wrong. But Sam's perspective was different. It was about service, sacrifice, and making a difference. You might be wondering why this meeting between Trump and Sam is so important. After all, they come from completely different worlds. One is a billionaire businessman turned politician, the other is a decorated soldier who has dedicated his life to serving his country. What could they possibly have in common? The answer lies in their differences. Trump represents ambition, drive, and the pursuit of personal success. Sam embodies duty, honor, and selflessness. When these two forces collide, something powerful happens. It's like mixing fire and water, not destructive, but transformative. This meeting matters because it challenges both men to see the world through new eyes. For Trump, it's an opportunity to reflect on his own values and priorities. For Sam, it's a chance to share his wisdom with someone who has the power to influence millions. And for us, the audience, it's a reminder that growth often comes from unexpected places. Sometimes, the people we least expect to teach us end up changing our lives in profound ways. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. There was tension between them, though it remained unspoken for most of the meeting. Trump, used to dominating conversations, struggled to adjust to Sam's calm and measured tone. He wanted to steer the discussion toward topics he was comfortable with: politics, business, and his own achievements. At one point, he tried to bring up his presidency. "You know, General," he said, "if I had been in charge during your time, things would have been different. We wouldn't have wasted so much time and money on unnecessary wars." Sam raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he responded with a question. "Mr. Trump, do you think leaders should focus on avoiding war or preparing for it?" Trump hesitated. He hadn't expected a counter question. "Well, both, I guess," he replied. Sam nodded thoughtfully. "That's where the challenge lies. A good leader must balance preparation with prevention. It's not easy, but it's necessary." This exchange highlighted the gap between their perspectives. Trump saw problems as opportunities to assert dominance, while Sam viewed them as chances to grow and adapt. Their approaches were fundamentally different, yet complementary in a strange way. One of the most striking aspects of their meeting was how much Trump listened. Normally, he's the one doing the talking. He loves to share his opinions, tell stories, and command attention. But with Sam, he found himself listening more than speaking. Why? Because Sam had a gift. He knew how to communicate without overwhelming. He spoke in short, clear sentences that were easy to follow. He didn't use big words or complicated phrases. Instead, he relied on honesty and authenticity to get his point across. For example, when Trump asked about fear, Sam didn't sugarcoat his response. "Fear is natural," he said. "Everyone feels it, whether they admit it or not. The key is learning how to face it." Trump frowned, clearly intrigued. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you keep going when you were scared?" Sam leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as if recalling a memory. "I reminded myself why I was there. My job wasn't just about me, it was about the people counting on me. That gave me strength." These moments of vulnerability made Sam relatable. Despite his age and accomplishments, he came across as human. He admitted to feeling afraid, unsure, and even doubtful at times. Yet, he persevered. And that's what made him inspiring. Another theme that emerged during their conversation was humility. Trump, known for his confidence and boldness, seemed almost humbled by Sam's presence. It wasn't that Sam tried to intimidate him, he did the opposite. He treated Trump with respect, acknowledging his achievements while gently challenging his assumptions. For instance, when Trump boasted about his business empire, Sam didn't dismiss it. Instead, he said, "Building something from scratch takes vision and determination. Those are valuable traits, Mr. Trump. But remember, leadership isn't just about building, it's also about rebuilding." Trump tilted his head, puzzled. "Rebuilding? What do you mean?" Sam explained, "Sometimes, the hardest part of leadership is fixing what's broken. Whether it's a relationship, a community, or a nation, true leaders don't shy away from difficult tasks. They embrace them." This idea resonated with Trump, though he didn't say so outright. He had faced criticism throughout his career for prioritizing profits over people. Hearing Sam's perspective forced him to reconsider his approach, at least for a moment. By now, you're probably wondering where this conversation will lead. Will Trump take Sam's advice to heart? Will their meeting inspire him to become a better leader? Or will he revert to his old habits once the day is over? We don't have answers yet, but clues are starting to emerge. The dynamic between Trump and Sam is evolving. What began as a simple meeting has turned into something deeper, a dialogue about values, purpose, and legacy. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light through the windows, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of mutual respect. Both men were aware that this encounter was special not because of who they were, but because of what they represented. Trump glanced at Sam, noticing the lines on his face and the weariness in his posture. Despite his age, Sam radiated strength. It wasn't physical strength, but something deeper, a quiet resilience that couldn't be shaken. "General," Trump said finally, "you've seen a lot in your life. What's the one thing you'd want people to remember?" Sam took a deep breath, considering the question carefully. "That we're all connected," he replied. "Our actions affect others, whether we realize it or not. So, choose wisely." With those words, the stage was set for the next phase of their meeting. The opening hook had done its job. It drew us in, introduced the characters, and hinted at the themes to come. Now, it was time to dive deeper into the heart of the story. To really understand what happened during this meeting, you need to know a little bit about both men. Donald Trump and General Sam Whitaker are very different people. Their personalities, their lives, and even the way they think are almost complete opposites. And that's where the conflict begins. Let's start with Donald Trump. If you've ever heard of him, you probably know he's a big personality. He's bold, loud, and unapologetic. When he walks into a room, everyone notices. He likes being in charge and doesn't like it when someone tries to take control away from him. For Trump, life is about winning. Whether it's business, politics, or even conversations, he always wants to come out on top. He's used to people agreeing with him or at least pretending to. That's just how things usually go for him. Now, let's talk about General Sam Whitaker. He's the opposite of Trump in almost every way. Sam is quiet, calm, and thoughtful. He doesn't try to draw attention to himself. In fact, most people don't even notice him at first. But if you spend time with him, you'll see there's something special about him. He's wise, much wiser than his age might suggest. He's been through so much in his life, and all those experiences have taught him valuable lessons. Unlike Trump, Sam doesn't care about being the center of attention. He cares about doing the right thing, no matter how hard it is. When Trump decided to invite Sam to Mar-a-Lago, a lot of people didn't understand why. They thought it was strange. Why would a billionaire like Trump want to meet an old retired soldier? Some of Trump's friends and advisors were confused too. One of them even said, "Why waste time with some old guy?" They thought it was just a publicity stunt, a way for Trump to get people talking about him again. Even Trump himself wasn't sure what to expect. When Sam arrived, Trump greeted him with a handshake and a joke. "So, General," Trump said with a grin, "tell me, what's your secret? How are you still standing after all these years?" It was a typical Trump question, direct, playful, and meant to show confidence. But Sam didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled faintly and leaned back in his chair. He looked at Trump carefully, studying him with his sharp blue eyes. You could tell Sam wasn't nervous or intimidated by Trump's big personality. In fact, he seemed amused, like he knew something Trump didn't. This moment set the tone for the rest of their meeting. There was tension in the air, but it wasn't obvious at first. It was more like a quiet undercurrent, something you could feel but not quite explain. Would Trump dominate the conversation like he usually does? Or would Sam's calm and steady presence throw him off balance? The tension between Trump and Sam came from their differences. Think about it, Trump grew up rich. He never had to worry about money or struggle to survive. His whole life has been about building bigger, better, and faster. He loves making deals, giving speeches, and being the boss. For him, success means having power and influence. Sam, on the other hand, grew up in a simpler time. He joined the military because he wanted to serve his country. He didn't do it for fame or fortune. He did it because he believed it was the right thing to do. Over the years, he faced danger, loss, and hardship. He learned that true strength isn't about being loud or flashy, it's about staying steady when times are tough. These two worlds couldn't be more different. Trump's world is fast-paced and focused on results. Sam's world is slow and deliberate, focused on values. When they met, it was like oil and water mixing, not blending smoothly, but creating ripples instead. As the meeting went on, Trump tried to take charge, just like he always does. He asked questions, made jokes, and shared stories about his own life. He talked about his businesses, his presidency, and all the amazing things he had accomplished. He wanted Sam to see how successful he was. But Sam didn't react the way Trump expected. Instead of nodding along or praising Trump, Sam listened quietly. When he did speak, his words were calm and measured. He didn't try to compete with Trump or prove him wrong. He simply shared his own perspective, letting Trump decide what to do with it. For example, at one point, Trump bragged about how quickly he makes decisions. "In my world," he said, "you have to act fast. If you wait too long, you miss your chance." Sam nodded thoughtfully before responding. "Speed can be useful," he said, "but sometimes patience is more important. Rushing into things without thinking can lead to mistakes." Trump frowned slightly. He wasn't used to hearing advice like this. Most people around him agree with everything he says or stay silent if they disagree. But Sam was different. He wasn't afraid to challenge Trump's ideas, even if he did it gently. The real conflict wasn't just about their words, it was about their personalities. Trump thrives on energy and excitement. He likes to keep things moving and hates silence. When there's a pause in the conversation, he fills it with another story or comment. For him, silence feels uncomfortable. Sam, however, is comfortable with silence. He uses it as a tool. When Trump finished speaking, Sam often waited a few seconds before responding. Those pauses gave him time to think and choose his words carefully. To Trump, these silences felt awkward at first. But over time, they started to make him curious. What was Sam thinking? Why wasn't he rushing to fill the space? This difference in style created a subtle tug of war between them. Trump wanted to steer the conversation his way, but Sam kept pulling it back. He didn't argue or raise his voice, he just stayed calm and steady. It was like watching a storm hit a mountain. The storm, Trump, raged and roared, but the mountain, Sam, stood firm, unmoved by the chaos around it. Another source of tension came from misunderstandings. Trump assumed that Sam was just an old man with war stories. He didn't think Sam had anything new or interesting to say. After all, Trump is used to dealing with powerful people, CEOs, politicians, celebrities. Compared to them, Sam seemed ordinary. But Sam wasn't ordinary. Beneath his quiet exterior was a wealth of knowledge and experience. He had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He had led soldiers into battle, negotiated peace treaties, and helped rebuild communities after disasters. He understood human nature in a way few others did. At first, Trump didn't realize this. He underestimated Sam, just like many others had done before. But as the meeting went on, small moments began to change his mind. For instance, when Trump mentioned a controversial decision he had made, Sam didn't criticize him. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions that made Trump reflect on his choices. "Why did you decide to do it that way?" Sam asked. "What were you hoping to achieve?" These questions caught Trump off guard. He wasn't used to being asked to explain himself. Most people either praised his decisions or attacked them. But Sam took a different approach. He treated Trump like a person, not a celebrity. This simple act of respect began to break down the walls between them. One of the most fascinating aspects of their meeting was how each man carried himself. Trump's presence was loud and commanding. He filled the room with his energy, his gestures, and his voice. Even when he was sitting still, you couldn't ignore him. Sam's presence was quieter, but just as powerful. He didn't need to shout or wave his arms to get attention. His strength came from within. It showed in the way he sat upright, the way he looked at Trump, and the way he spoke. Every word he said carried weight, even if it was spoken softly. This contrast became clearer as the meeting progressed. Trump noticed that Sam wasn't trying to impress him or win arguments. He was simply sharing his truth. And that made Trump curious. Who was this man who could sit across from him and remain completely unfazed? By now, the tension between Trump and Sam was growing stronger. Neither man had raised his voice or argued directly, but the clash of their personalities was undeniable. Would Trump continue to dominate the conversation, or would Sam's quiet strength win out? The audience, the readers, can feel this suspense too. We know that something important is happening, even if we don't fully understand it yet. The stakes aren't obvious, but they're there. Both men have something to gain or lose from this meeting. For Trump, it's a chance to learn humility and wisdom. For Sam, it's an opportunity to share his legacy with someone who has the power to make a difference. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the room, the atmosphere shifted. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of mutual respect. But the tension remained, simmering beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. As the meeting continued, the tension between Trump and Sam grew stronger. It wasn't just about their personalities, it was also about their values. Trump believed in action, speed, and results. He thought that being decisive and bold was the key to success. But Sam had a different philosophy. He believed in patience, reflection, and understanding the deeper meaning behind actions. This difference became clear when Trump brought up one of his favorite topics, winning. "You know, General," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "in life, you either win or you lose. There's no middle ground. You have to fight for what you want, and you can't let anyone stand in your way." Sam listened carefully, nodding slightly. Then he replied, "Winning is important, Mr. Trump. But it's not the only thing that matters. Sometimes, how you win or how you lose says more about you than the outcome itself." Trump raised an eyebrow. This wasn't the kind of answer he was used to hearing. Most people would agree with him or try to argue back. But Sam didn't do either. Instead, he offered a new perspective, one that made Trump pause. One of the most surprising things about this meeting was how much Trump listened. Normally, he's the one doing the talking. He loves to share his opinions, tell stories, and dominate conversations. But with Sam, he found himself listening more than speaking. Why? Because Sam had a gift. He knew how to communicate without overwhelming. He spoke in short, clear sentences that were easy to follow. He didn't use big words or complicated phrases. Instead, he relied on honesty and authenticity to get his point across. For example, when Trump asked about leadership, Sam didn't give a long lecture. He simply said, "A good leader listens more than he speaks. He learns from others and uses their wisdom to guide his decisions." Trump frowned slightly, thinking about this. He wasn't used to seeing leadership this way. For him, leaders were supposed to be strong, confident, and in charge. They didn't wait for advice, they gave orders. But Sam's approach was different. It was quieter, but no less powerful. Another theme that emerged during their conversation was humility. Trump, known for his confidence and boldness, seemed almost humbled by Sam's presence. It wasn't that Sam tried to intimidate him, he did the opposite. He treated Trump with respect, acknowledging his achievements while gently challenging his assumptions. For instance, when Trump boasted about his business empire, Sam didn't dismiss it. Instead, he said, "Building something from scratch takes vision and determination. Those are valuable traits, Mr. Trump. But remember, leadership isn't just about building, it's also about rebuilding." Trump tilted his head, puzzled. "Rebuilding? What do you mean?" Sam explained, "Sometimes, the hardest part of leadership is fixing what's broken. Whether it's a relationship, a community, or a nation, true leaders don't shy away from difficult tasks. They embrace them." This idea resonated with Trump, though he didn't say so outright. He had faced criticism throughout his career for prioritizing profits over people. Hearing Sam's perspective forced him to reconsider his approach, at least for a moment. Fear was another topic that came up during their discussion. Trump, who prides himself on being fearless, admitted that he rarely feels afraid. "I don't believe in fear," he said. "If you let fear control you, you'll never get anything done." Sam smiled faintly. "Fear is natural," he replied. "Everyone feels it, whether they admit it or not. The key is learning how to face it." Trump looked intrigued. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you keep going when you were scared?" Sam leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as if recalling a memory. "I reminded myself why I was there. My job wasn't just about me, it was about the people counting on me. That gave me strength." These moments of vulnerability made Sam relatable. Despite his age and accomplishments, he came across as human. He admitted to feeling afraid, unsure, and even doubtful at times. Yet, he persevered. And that's what made him inspiring. As the meeting went on, the conversation turned to legacy. Trump, who has always been focused on leaving a mark on the world, asked Sam what he hoped people would remember about him. "When you're gone," Trump said, "what do you want people to say about you?" Sam took a deep breath, considering the question carefully. "That we're all connected," he replied. "Our actions affect others, whether we realize it or not. So, choose wisely." Trump nodded slowly, absorbing Sam's words. He realized that legacy wasn't just about fame or fortune. It was about the impact you had on others, the lives you touched, the lessons you taught, and the values you stood for. By now, the tension between Trump and Sam had reached its peak. Both men were aware of their differences, but they were also starting to see the value in each other's perspectives. For Trump, this meeting was a chance to step outside his comfort zone and learn something new. For Sam, it was an opportunity to share his wisdom with someone who had the power to influence millions. The turning point came when Trump asked a question that surprised even himself. "General," he said, "if you could give me one piece of advice, what would it be?" Sam didn't hesitate. "Be mindful of the ripple effect," he said. "Every decision you make sends waves through the lives of others. Make sure those waves bring peace, not chaos." Trump sat silently for a moment, letting Sam's words sink in. He had never thought about leadership in this way before. For him, decisions were about achieving goals and proving others wrong. But Sam's perspective was different. It was about service, sacrifice, and making a difference. By the end of their meeting, the tension between Trump and Sam had transformed into mutual respect. They hadn't agreed on everything. In fact, their views on many topics remained fundamentally different. But they had found common ground in their shared desire to lead and inspire. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the windows, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of connection. Both men were aware that this encounter was special not because of who they were, but because of what they represented. Trump glanced at Sam, noticing the lines on his face and the weariness in his posture. Despite his age, Sam radiated strength. It wasn't physical strength, but something deeper, a quiet resilience that couldn't be shaken. "Thank you, General," Trump said finally. "I'll think about what you've said." Sam smiled faintly. "I hope you do," he replied. "And remember, leadership is a journey, not a destination." With those words, the stage was set for the next phase of their meeting. The conflict had served its purpose. It had drawn us in, highlighted their differences, and hinted at the themes to come. Now, it was time to move toward resolution. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. This isn't just a meeting, it's a journey. And like any great journey, it's filled with twists, turns, and moments of revelation. Looking back, the conflict between Trump and Sam was essential to the story. Without it, their meeting wouldn't have been as compelling. The clash of personalities, values, and perspectives created tension that kept us engaged. It made us wonder, who would come out on top? Would Trump change his ways, or would he remain the same? But the beauty of their interaction lies in its subtlety. There were no shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. Instead, the tension unfolded quietly, through pauses, questions, and thoughtful responses. It was a battle of ideas, not egos. This approach worked perfectly for the tone of the story. By keeping things simple and relatable, we ensured that readers of all ages could understand and appreciate the message. After all, the lessons Sam shared about humility, patience, and legacy are universal. They apply to everyone, regardless of age, background, or experience. Before we dive into the next section, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. Trump and Sam may seem like opposites, but they share one important trait: a desire to lead. Their methods and philosophies differ, but their goal is the same: to make a positive impact on the world. Through their meeting, we've seen how conflict can lead to growth. By challenging each other's assumptions, they've opened doors to new possibilities. For Trump, this meeting is a chance to rethink his approach to leadership. For Sam, it's an opportunity to pass on his wisdom to the next generation. As we move forward, keep these themes in mind. They'll guide us through the rest of the story and help us understand why this meeting mattered not just for Trump and Sam, but for all of us. As the conversation between Donald Trump and General Sam Whitaker went on, something interesting started to happen. At first, Trump thought this meeting would be just like any other talk he'd had before. He was ready to share his opinions, tell stories about himself, and maybe even give some advice. But it didn't take long for him to realize that this wasn't going to be a normal chat. Sam spoke slowly, taking his time with every word. He didn't rush or try to impress anyone. Instead, he chose his words carefully, making sure each one meant something. His sentences were short and simple, but they carried a lot of weight. It was as if every word he said had been thought about for years. He began by sharing stories from his time in the military. These weren't just random tales, they were lessons wrapped in memories. He talked about battles he had fought in, both the ones he won and the ones he lost. He described friendships he had made along the way, friendships that had helped him survive tough times. And most importantly, he shared the lessons he had learned from all those experiences. Trump listened closely, though he couldn't help but interrupt at one point. He wanted to steer the conversation toward politics because that's what he knew best. "You know, General," Trump said confidently, "if I were running things back then, we wouldn't have wasted so much time and money on those wars." Sam nodded thoughtfully, not rushing to respond. When he finally spoke, his answer surprised Trump. "Mr. Trump," Sam said calmly, "leadership isn't about winning or losing. It's about understanding the cost of your decisions, not just for yourself, but for others." Trump frowned, clearly taken aback. This wasn't the kind of response he was expecting. Most people would either agree with him or argue back. But Sam did neither. Instead, he offered a new perspective, one that made Trump stop and think. For once, Trump didn't have a quick comeback. He sat quietly, letting Sam's words sink in. Throughout their meeting, Sam continued to share stories from his life. Each story revealed a little more about who he was and what he believed in. For example, he talked about how hard it was to join the military when he was younger. Back then, discrimination was common, and many people doubted whether someone like him could succeed. But Sam didn't let that stop him. He worked harder than anyone else, proving his critics wrong. He also talked about fighting two kinds of enemies, those abroad and those within his own ranks. While serving overseas, he faced danger every day. Bombs exploded around him, bullets flew past him, and lives were lost. But when he returned home, he discovered another battle waiting for him: prejudice. Some people in the military didn't believe he deserved to rise through the ranks because of his background. They tried to hold him back, but Sam refused to give up. These stories added depth to Sam's character. They painted a picture of a man who had overcome incredible odds to serve his country. He wasn't just an old soldier with medals, he was a fighter, inside and out. Every challenge he faced had shaped him into the person he was today. Trump listened intently, growing quieter with each passing moment. He wasn't used to hearing stories like these. In his world, success was measured by money, power, and fame. But Sam's success was different. It was about perseverance, courage, and doing the right thing even when it was hard. One of the most surprising things about this meeting was how much Trump listened. Normally, he's the one doing the talking. He loves to share his opinions, tell jokes, and dominate conversations. But with Sam, he found himself listening more than speaking. Why? Because Sam had a gift. He knew how to communicate without overwhelming. He spoke in short, clear sentences that were easy to follow. He didn't use big words or complicated phrases. Instead, he relied on honesty and authenticity to get his point across. For example, when Trump asked about fear, Sam didn't sugarcoat his response. "Fear is natural," he said. "Everyone feels it, whether they admit it or not. The key is learning how to face it." Trump frowned slightly, thinking about this. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you keep going when you were scared?" Sam leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as if recalling a memory. "I reminded myself why I was there. My job wasn't just about me, it was about the people counting on me. That gave me strength." These moments of vulnerability made Sam relatable. Despite his age and accomplishments, he came across as human. He admitted to feeling afraid, unsure, and even doubtful at times. Yet, he persevered. And that's what made him inspiring. Another theme that emerged during their conversation was leadership. Trump, who has always seen himself as a strong leader, asked Sam what made someone truly great at leading others. "What's the secret?" Trump asked. "How do you inspire people to follow you?" Sam smiled faintly before answering. "A good leader listens more than he speaks," he said. "He learns from others and uses their wisdom to guide his decisions." Trump tilted his head, puzzled. "But don't people expect leaders to be bold and decisive?" he asked. "Yes," Sam replied, "but boldness without understanding can lead to mistakes. A true leader balances action with reflection. He thinks about the consequences of his choices not just for himself, but for everyone affected by them." This idea resonated with Trump, though he didn't say so outright. He had faced criticism throughout his career for prioritizing profits over people. Hearing Sam's perspective forced him to reconsider his approach at least for a moment. As the meeting continued, Sam introduced another important concept: the ripple effect. "Every decision you make sends waves through the lives of others," he explained. "Sometimes, those waves bring peace. Other times, they cause chaos. It's up to you to decide which kind of waves you want to create." Trump nodded slowly, absorbing Sam's words. He realized that leadership wasn't just about achieving goals, it was about the impact you had on others. Your actions mattered, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. This realization hit Trump especially hard when Sam shared a personal story. "There was a time," Sam said, "when I made a decision that saved my team but cost innocent civilians their lives. I still carry that guilt with me. It taught me that even the best intentions can have unintended consequences." Trump looked at Sam, seeing him in a new light. He had never thought about leadership this way before. For him, decisions were about results, about winning or losing. But Sam's perspective was different. It was about responsibility, accountability, and caring for others. By now, the rising action of their meeting was reaching its peak. Each revelation from Sam added another layer to the story, keeping the audience engaged and curious. What would Trump say next? Would he accept Sam's advice, or would he dismiss it? The tension wasn't loud or obvious, it was subtle, hidden beneath their words and expressions. Trump's frowns, pauses, and thoughtful nods hinted at inner conflict. Was he starting to see the world differently? Or was he simply humoring Sam? Meanwhile, Sam remained calm and steady, guiding the conversation with patience and wisdom. He didn't push Trump to agree with him. Instead, he planted seeds of thought, letting Trump decide what to do with them. Throughout the meeting, small revelations kept adding up, painting a fuller picture of both men. For Trump, it was a chance to reflect on his own life and leadership style. For Sam, it was an opportunity to share his legacy with someone who had the power to influence millions. One of the most powerful moments came when Sam talked about sacrifice. "Being a leader means putting others before yourself," he said. "It's not about glory or recognition. It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching." Trump nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He realized that sacrifice wasn't something he thought about often. In his world, success was about standing out and being noticed. But Sam's success was about blending in and serving quietly. By the end of their conversation, the rising action had built enough suspense to set the stage for the climax. Both men were aware of the tension between them, but they were also starting to see the value in each other's perspectives. For Trump, this meeting was a chance to step outside his comfort zone and learn something new. For Sam, it was an opportunity to pass on his wisdom to the next generation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the windows, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a sense of connection. Both men were aware that this encounter was special not because of who they were, but because of what they represented. One of the most striking moments came when Sam shared a deeply personal story about his early days in the military. He talked about how hard it was to earn respect from his peers. "When I first joined," he said, "many people doubted me. They thought I didn't belong because of where I came from. Some even tried to block my promotions." Trump leaned forward, genuinely interested. "What did you do?" he asked. "How did you prove them wrong?" Sam smiled faintly. "I worked harder than anyone else. I studied tactics, learned languages, and trained until I could outperform everyone around me. But more importantly, I stayed true to myself. I didn't let their negativity define me." This answer surprised Trump. He was used to people fighting back against critics by being louder or more aggressive. But Sam's approach was different. It was quiet, steady, and focused on self-improvement rather than revenge. "You know," Trump said after a pause, "that takes real strength. Most people would have given up." Sam nodded. "Giving up is easy. Staying strong is hard. But if you believe in what you're doing, it's worth it." Another powerful moment came when Sam talked about the cost of decisions, both good and bad. He explained that every choice a leader makes has consequences, not just for themselves but for others. "Leadership isn't just about making decisions," he said. "It's about understanding the impact those decisions have." Trump frowned slightly. "But how do you know if you're making the right decision? What if you make a mistake?" Sam thought for a moment before answering. "You'll never know everything beforehand. That's why leaders need to listen to experts, to their team, and to their conscience. And if they do make a mistake, they should admit it and fix it. No one expects perfection, Mr. Trump. They expect honesty." These words struck a chord with Trump. Throughout his career, he had faced criticism for refusing to apologize or admit fault. Hearing Sam's perspective made him reconsider whether admitting mistakes might actually be a sign of strength, not weakness. Earlier in their conversation, Sam had introduced the idea of the ripple effect, the idea that every action creates waves that affect others. Now, he expanded on this concept, using examples from his own life. "There was a mission once," Sam began, "where we had to choose between attacking an enemy base and evacuating civilians. We chose to attack because it seemed like the faster option. But later, we discovered that innocent people had been caught in the crossfire. I still think about them every day." Trump looked at Sam, seeing the pain in his eyes. "That must have been tough," he said quietly. "It was," Sam admitted. "But it taught me something important. As a leader, your job isn't just to act, it's to think. You have to consider not just the immediate result but also the long-term effects." Trump nodded slowly, letting the lesson sink in. For someone who prided himself on quick decision-making, this was a new way of thinking. It challenged him to slow down and weigh his choices more carefully. Teamwork was another topic that came up during their discussion. Trump, who often emphasizes individual achievement, asked Sam how he managed to lead such diverse groups of soldiers. "How do you get people to work together when they're so different?" he asked. Sam chuckled softly. "It's not easy," he admitted. People come from all walks of life, with different backgrounds and opinions. But the key is finding common ground. You focus on what unites them, not what divides them. He went on to explain that trust is the foundation of teamwork. If your team trusts you, they'll follow you anywhere. But earning that trust takes time. You have to show them that you care not just about the mission, but about them as individuals. Trump nodded thoughtfully. He realized that building trust wasn't something he had focused on much in his own leadership style. His approach had always been more about commanding respect than earning it. But Sam's perspective made him wonder if there was another way. As the meeting progressed, the conversation turned to legacy. Trump, who has always been focused on leaving a mark on the world, asked Sam what he hoped people would remember about him. "When you're gone," Trump said, "what do you want people to say about you?" Sam took a deep breath, considering the question carefully. "That I cared," he replied simply. "That I tried to leave the world a little better than I found it." Trump sat silently for a moment, absorbing Sam's words. He realized that legacy wasn't just about fame or fortune. It was about the impact you had on others, the lives you touched, the lessons you taught, and the values you stood for. "Do you think about your legacy?" Sam asked gently. Trump hesitated before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I guess I've always thought of it in terms of achievements, buildings, deals, elections. Not so much about caring." Sam smiled faintly. "Achievements are important, Mr. Trump. But they're not enough. True legacy comes from the connections you make and the kindness you show." By now, the rising action had reached its peak. Both men were fully engaged in the conversation, sharing thoughts and ideas that challenged their beliefs. For Trump, this meeting was becoming more than just a casual chat. It was a chance to reflect on his life and leadership style. For Sam, it was an opportunity to share his wisdom with someone who had the power to influence millions. The turning point came when Trump asked a question that surprised even himself. "General," he said, "if you could give me one piece of advice, what would it be?" Sam didn't hesitate. "Be mindful of the ripple effect," he said. "Every decision you make sends waves through the lives of others. Make sure those waves bring peace, not chaos." Trump sat silently for a moment, letting Sam's words sink in. He had never thought about leadership in this way before. For him, decisions were about achieving goals and proving others wrong. But Sam's perspective was different. It was about service, sacrifice, and making a difference. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, the atmosphere shifted. The tension that had built throughout their conversation began to transform into mutual respect. Both men were aware that this encounter was special not because of who they were, but because of what they represented. Trump glanced at Sam, noticing the lines on his face and the weariness in his posture. Despite his age, Sam radiated strength. It wasn't physical strength, but something deeper, a quiet resilience that couldn't be shaken. "Thank you, General," Trump said finally. "I'll think about what you've said." Sam smiled faintly. "I hope you do," he replied. "And remember, leadership is a journey, not a destination." With those words, the stage was set for the climax of their meeting. The rising action had served its purpose. It had drawn us in, highlighted their differences, and hinted at the themes to come. Now, it was time to move toward resolution. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. This isn't just a meeting, it's a journey. And like any great journey, it's filled with twists, turns, and moments of revelation. Looking back, the rising action of this story was essential to its success. Without it, the meeting between Trump and Sam wouldn't have been as compelling. The gradual buildup of tension, combined with small revelations, kept us engaged and curious. We wanted to know what would happen next and why it mattered. Through their conversation, we saw how conflict can lead to growth. By challenging each other's assumptions, Trump and Sam opened doors to new possibilities. For Trump, this meeting was a chance to rethink his approach to leadership. For Sam, it was an opportunity to share his wisdom with someone who had the power to make a difference. As we move forward, keep these themes in mind. They'll guide us through the rest of the story and help us understand why this meeting mattered not just for Trump and Sam, but for all of us. Before we dive into the next section, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. Trump and Sam may seem like opposites, but they share one important trait: a desire to lead. Their methods and philosophies differ, but their goal is the same: to make a positive impact on the world. Through their meeting, we've seen how conflict can lead to growth. By challenging each other's assumptions, they've opened doors to new possibilities. For Trump, this meeting is a chance to rethink his approach to leadership. For Sam, it's an opportunity to pass on his wisdom to the next generation. As we move forward, keep these themes in mind. They'll guide us through the rest of the story and help us understand why this meeting mattered not just for Trump and Sam, but for all of us. Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The room was quiet except for the sound of their voices. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink colors. Inside, the light grew softer, casting long shadows across the table where Donald Trump and General Sam Whitaker sat. It felt like the perfect time for something big to happen. Sam leaned forward slightly in his chair. His blue eyes locked onto Trump's face. Then he asked a question that made Trump freeze. "Do you want to know my greatest victory, Mr. Trump?" Trump hesitated. He wasn't sure what to expect. Was it going to be another war story? Or maybe some advice about leadership? Whatever it was, Sam's tone told him it was important. So, after a short pause, Trump nodded. "Sure," he said. "Tell me." Sam's voice softened, but his words hit like a hammer. "My greatest victory wasn't on the battlefield. It was learning to lead without fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of death. Once you conquer that, nothing can stop you." For a brief moment, Trump looked different. Not the confident, bold man we're used to seeing, but someone more thoughtful, almost vulnerable. It was as if Sam's words had struck a nerve deep inside him. They forced him to think about parts of himself he rarely talked about or even admitted existed. You might be wondering why this moment mattered so much. After all, it was just a few sentences, right? But those sentences carried a lot of weight. Let's break it down. First, Sam didn't talk about winning battles or earning medals. Instead, he focused on something much deeper: overcoming fear. For most people, fear is a natural part of life. Whether it's fear of failing, being judged, or even dying, these feelings can hold us back. But Sam had learned how to face them head on. And not only that, he had turned fear into strength. Second, Sam's words challenged Trump in a way no one else had before. Trump is known for being fearless, or at least pretending to be. He often says things like, "I don't believe in fear." But deep down, does he really mean it? Or is he just trying to act tough? Sam's statement made Trump stop and think. Could he truly say he led without fear? Or was there still something holding him back? When Sam finished speaking, Trump didn't respond right away. He just sat there, staring at the table, lost in thought. You could see the wheels turning in his mind. For once, he wasn't rushing to give an answer or make a joke. He was actually thinking. This reaction was unusual for Trump. Normally, he's quick to speak, quick to argue, and quick to defend himself. But here, in this quiet room with Sam, he seemed unsure of what to say. Why? Because Sam's words weren't just about leadership, they were about life. They touched on something universal that everyone struggles with: fear. Trump's expression changed too. His usual confident smile faded, replaced by a look of seriousness. It was as if he was seeing himself in a new light. Here was a man who had lived through unimaginable hardships, wars, prejudice, loss, and yet remained humble and grounded. Could Trump say the same about himself? To understand why Sam's victory was so powerful, let's take a closer look at what he meant. When he said his greatest victory was learning to lead without fear, he wasn't just talking about bravery in battle. He was talking about inner strength, the kind that comes from facing your fears and refusing to let them control you. Think about it. Fear is tricky. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Maybe you're afraid of failing at something important. Maybe you're scared of what others will think of you. Or maybe you're worried about losing something or someone you love. These fears can paralyze you, making it hard to move forward. But Sam had found a way to beat fear. How? By focusing on what mattered most, his purpose. He reminded himself why he was doing what he did. Whether it was protecting his soldiers, serving his country, or helping innocent civilians, his mission gave him strength. It helped him push past his doubts and keep going, even when things got tough. By the end of their meeting, something truly remarkable had happened. It wasn't a big, dramatic event, no shouting matches or sudden declarations, but it was clear that both men had been affected in ways they hadn't expected. Donald Trump didn't walk away from the conversation unchanged. Though he didn't say it out loud, those close to him noticed a difference in how he acted afterward. He seemed quieter, more thoughtful, and less eager to argue. Some people even whispered that Sam's words might have planted seeds of doubt in Trump's mind about his own approach to leadership. On the other side, General Sam Whitaker also left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. While he didn't seek recognition or praise, word of his meeting with Trump began to spread quietly among military circles. People started talking about the wisdom he shared and the way he handled himself during the conversation. Slowly but surely, Sam earned newfound respect not just for his years of service, but for the way he inspired others, even someone as powerful as Trump. Let's take a closer look at what happened next and why this resolution mattered so much for both men and for everyone watching. After the meeting, Trump didn't immediately announce that he had learned anything. He didn't post about it on social media or give interviews explaining how Sam had changed his perspective. But if you paid attention, you could see small signs that something was different. For example, Trump started asking more questions during meetings. Normally, he liked to do most of the talking. He would share his opinions, make decisions quickly, and expect others to follow along. But now, he seemed more interested in hearing what others had to say. He asked advisors for their thoughts before jumping to conclusions. He listened to feedback instead of brushing it off. Some of his friends and colleagues noticed this change too. One of them later said, it was like he was trying to understand things better instead of just winning arguments. This was unusual for Trump, who was known for always wanting to be right. But after meeting Sam, he seemed more willing to pause and think before acting. Did Trump completely change overnight? No. He was still the same bold, confident man he had always been. But there was a new layer to him, a hint of reflection and maybe even humility. It was as if Sam's words had opened a door in his mind, letting in fresh ideas and perspectives. While Trump returned to his busy life, Sam went back to his duties with a renewed sense of purpose. For someone like Sam, who had spent decades serving others, this meant continuing to lead by example. He didn't seek fame or glory, he simply wanted to keep doing what he believed in, helping people and making a positive impact. Word of his meeting with Trump began to spread quietly among military circles. At first, it was just whispers, soldiers and officers sharing stories about how Sam had stood up to one of the most powerful men in the world without raising his voice or showing anger. They admired how calm and steady he had been, even when faced with Trump's larger-than-life personality. As more people heard about the meeting, Sam's reputation grew. Younger soldiers looked up to him not just because of his medals or rank, but because of the way he carried himself. He showed them that true strength comes from within, not from titles, wealth, or power. One soldier later said, "General Whitaker taught us that leadership isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about listening, caring, and doing what's right even when it's hard." This newfound respect wasn't just limited to the military. Civilians who heard about the meeting were inspired too. They saw Sam as a symbol of quiet courage and wisdom, a reminder that real heroes don't always wear capes or appear on TV. Sometimes, they're the people working behind the scenes, making the world a better place without asking for anything in return. One of the biggest lessons from this story is that true power doesn't come from titles, money, or fame. It comes from the ability to inspire and uplift others. Both Trump and Sam demonstrated this in their own ways. Trump has always been a man of influence. He's built skyscrapers, run companies, and led nations. His name is known around the world, and his actions affect millions of people. But after meeting Sam, he began to realize that power isn't just about achieving goals or proving others wrong. It's also about connecting with people, understanding their struggles, and using your position to help them. Sam, on the other hand, showed that power can exist without any of the usual trappings. He didn't need fancy suits, private jets, or armies of followers to command respect. All he needed was his character, his honesty, patience, and wisdom. These qualities made him a leader in the truest sense of the word. Together, Trump and Sam proved that power takes many forms. It can be loud and bold, like Trump's presence, or quiet and steady, like Sam's demeanor. What matters most is how you use it. Do you use your power to lift others up, or do you use it to push them down? That's the question both men and all of us must answer. As the days passed, both Trump and Sam likely reflected on their meeting in their own ways. For Trump, it was a chance to rethink some of the things he had always believed about leadership. He had always thought that being decisive and bold was enough. But Sam's words reminded him that leadership is also about empathy, patience, and responsibility. For Sam, the meeting was a reminder of why he had chosen to serve in the first place. It wasn't for medals, promotions, or recognition. It was because he wanted to make a difference, to leave the world a little better than he found it. Meeting Trump gave him an opportunity to share that message with someone who had the power to amplify it. Both men walked away from the meeting with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. They may never meet again, but the impact of their conversation will stay with them forever. The effects of their meeting didn't stop with Trump and Sam. Like ripples in a pond, the lessons they shared spread outward, touching the lives of others. For Trump's team, the change in his behavior was noticeable. Meetings became more collaborative, with everyone encouraged to share their thoughts. Decisions were made more carefully, with consideration for their long-term effects. Even though Trump still had his signature confidence, there was a new layer of thoughtfulness to his actions. For Sam's colleagues and soldiers, the meeting served as a source of inspiration. They saw how one person's wisdom could reach even the highest levels of power. It reminded them that no matter where you come from or what your background is, your voice matters. If you speak with honesty and conviction, people will listen. And for the rest of us, the audience watching this story unfold, the meeting was a lesson in humanity. It showed us that growth often comes from unexpected places. When two very different people come together, they can learn from each other and create something meaningful. The resolution of this story is important because it shows that change is possible even for someone as set in their ways as Donald Trump. It reminds us that no matter who we are or what we've done, we can always grow, learn, and improve. All it takes is an open mind and a willingness to listen. At the same time, the resolution highlights the value of wisdom and experience. Sam didn't have Trump's wealth or fame, but he had something just as valuable: a lifetime of lessons learned through hardship and perseverance. By sharing those lessons, he made a lasting impact not just on Trump, but on everyone who heard about their meeting. Finally, the resolution reinforces the idea that true justice isn't about punishing wrongdoers or settling scores. It's about creating positive change. In this case, the justice came from the mutual respect and understanding that developed between Trump and Sam. Both men gained something valuable from the meeting, and both used that knowledge to become better versions of themselves. Before we wrap up this section, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. The resolution of Trump and Sam's meeting wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it was deeply meaningful. It showed us that even the smallest changes can have a big impact. Whether it's learning to listen more, leading with compassion, or standing firm in your values, every action matters. As we move forward, keep these themes in mind. They'll guide us through the final part of the story and help us understand why this meeting mattered not just for Trump and Sam, but for all of us. Looking back, the resolution of this story was essential to its success. Without it, the meeting between Trump and Sam wouldn't have felt complete. The gradual buildup of tension, combined with moments of reflection and growth, kept us engaged and curious. We wanted to know what would happen next and why it mattered. Through their conversation, we saw how conflict can lead to growth. By challenging each other's assumptions, Trump and Sam opened doors to new possibilities. For Trump, this meeting was a chance to rethink his approach to leadership. For Sam, it was an opportunity to share his wisdom with someone who had the power to make a difference. As we move forward, keep these themes in mind. They'll guide us through the rest of the story and help us understand why this meeting mattered not just for Trump and Sam, but for all of us. In the end, the conversation between Donald Trump and General Sam Whitaker taught us something very important. It reminded us of a simple truth: sometimes, the most profound lessons come from the unlikeliest sources. Think about it. Who would have guessed that a billionaire businessman and a battle-hardened soldier could sit down together and share ideas that would change how they saw the world? Life has a funny way of teaching us things when we least expect it. Whether you're rich or poor, famous or unknown, young or old, there's always something new to learn if you're willing to listen. That's what this story is all about. It's about being open to new perspectives, even when they come from people who seem completely different from you. Let's think about Donald Trump for a moment. He's someone who has spent his whole life in the spotlight. People look up to him or criticize him for the things he says and does. He's used to making big decisions and taking charge. But meeting Sam showed him that leadership isn't just about power or control. It's also about listening, learning, and growing. Now, let's think about Sam. He's a man who has lived through wars, faced discrimination, and worked tirelessly to serve his country. His life has been full of challenges, but he never gave up. Instead, he found strength in those hard times and used them to become a better person. When he sat down with Trump, he didn't try to impress him or argue with him. He simply shared his wisdom in a calm and humble way. What makes their meeting so special is that neither of them expected to learn as much as they did. Trump probably thought he was just having a casual chat with an old soldier. And Sam might have thought he was simply sharing stories from his past. But by the end of their time together, both men walked away changed just a little bit in ways they didn't expect. One of the biggest lessons from this story is the power of listening. In today's world, everyone wants to be heard. We all want to share our opinions, tell our stories, and make sure others understand us. But sometimes, the best thing we can do is stop talking and start listening. When Trump listened to Sam, he discovered a new way of thinking about leadership. He realized that being a leader isn't just about giving orders or making quick decisions. It's also about understanding the impact of your choices and caring for the people around you. For Sam, listening wasn't just a skill, it was a way of life. Throughout his career, he had learned to pay attention to the needs of his soldiers, the advice of his peers, and the voices of those who disagreed with him. This ability to listen made him a stronger, wiser leader. The next time you find yourself in a conversation with someone who seems very different from you, try to really listen to what they have to say. You might be surprised by what you learn. Another important lesson from this story is humility. Humility means being willing to admit that you don't know everything. It means accepting that other people might have valuable insights even if they come from backgrounds or experiences that are completely different from yours. Trump isn't known for being humble. He's confident, bold, and sure of himself. But after meeting Sam, he seemed more reflective. He started asking questions instead of always having the answers. He began to consider other people's perspectives instead of focusing only on his own. Sam, on the other hand, has always been humble. He doesn't brag about his accomplishments or seek attention for his sacrifices. Instead, he lets his actions speak for themselves. His humility is part of what makes him such a powerful role model. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. When you approach life with humility, you open yourself up to new possibilities. You become more willing to learn, grow, and connect with others. Even though Trump and Sam are very different, they were able to find common ground during their meeting. They both care deeply about leadership, though they define it in different ways. They both want to make a positive impact on the world, even if their methods differ. Finding common ground is something we can all practice in our daily lives. Whether you're talking to a friend, a coworker, or even a stranger, look for the things you have in common. Maybe you share similar goals, values, or interests. Once you find that connection, it becomes easier to work together and learn from each other. Trump and Sam proved that differences don't have to divide us. In fact, they can bring us closer together. By embracing their differences, they created a space where meaningful conversations could happen. This story is also a reminder to stay open-minded. It's easy to judge people based on first impressions or stereotypes. We often assume we know what someone is like before we even meet them. But the truth is, everyone has layers. There's always more to a person than meets the eye. When Trump first met Sam, he probably thought of him as just an old soldier. But as they talked, he realized that Sam was much more than that. He was a wise, thoughtful, and inspiring human being with a wealth of knowledge to share. The same goes for Sam. At first glance, he might have seen Trump as just a businessman or just a politician. But as they spoke, he likely discovered qualities in Trump that he hadn't anticipated, qualities like curiosity, determination, and a desire to improve. The next time you meet someone new, try to keep an open mind. Don't jump to conclusions based on appearances or assumptions. Give them a chance to surprise you. You never know what you might discover. This story isn't just about Trump and Sam. It's about all of us. It reminds us that no matter who we are or where we come from, we can always learn from others. Every person we meet has something to teach us if we're willing to listen. It also reminds us that growth often comes from discomfort. When we step outside our comfort zones and engage with people who are different from us, we challenge ourselves to see the world in new ways. That's how we grow, not just as individuals, but as a society. Finally, this story inspires us to lead with kindness, patience, and empathy. Leadership isn't just about achieving goals or gaining power. It's about lifting others up, helping them succeed, and leaving the world a better place than you found it. One of the most beautiful things about this story is how small actions can create big changes. Trump and Sam didn't set out to change the world when they met. They were simply two people having a conversation. But because they approached that conversation with honesty and respect, they ended up inspiring countless others, including us. Think about the ripple effect of their meeting. Trump's team noticed a shift in his behavior. Soldiers admired Sam's courage and wisdom. And readers like you were inspired by their story. All of these effects came from one simple act, two people sitting down and talking. The same principle applies to our own lives. Every kind word, every thoughtful gesture, every moment of understanding creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. So, the next time you interact with someone, remember that your words and actions matter. Even the smallest things can have a big impact. As we wrap up this story, Let's take a moment to reflect on what it means for you. The meeting between Trump and Sam shows us that growth and learning are lifelong journeys. No matter how much experience or success you have, there's always room to improve. It also reminds us that true strength comes from within. It's not about titles, money, or fame. It's about character, the way you treat others, the values you stand for, and the legacy you leave behind. Most importantly, this story encourages us to be brave enough to embrace change. Life will always throw challenges our way, but it's up to us to decide how we respond. Will we close ourselves off, or will we open our hearts and minds to new possibilities? So, here's my challenge to you: the next time you find yourself facing someone vastly different from you, remember this story. Be curious. Ask questions. Listen carefully. You never know what you might learn or how it might change you forever. Whether you're a student, a teacher, a parent, or a friend, you have the power to inspire others. Lead with kindness. Speak with honesty. Act with integrity. These small choices add up to create a better world for everyone. And finally, don't forget that you, too, have wisdom to share. Just like Sam, you've lived through experiences that have shaped who you are. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Someone out there needs to hear what you have to say. This story about Trump and Sam isn't just a tale of two men, it's a lesson for all of us. It teaches us to value humility, embrace diversity, and seek wisdom wherever we can find it. It reminds us that true leadership is about serving others, not just ourselves. As we close this chapter, I hope you feel inspired to carry these lessons into your own life. Remember, the most profound lessons often come from the unlikeliest sources. Keep your heart and mind open, and you'll be amazed at what you can learn. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope it leaves a lasting impression on you and maybe even changes the way you see the world.